Hey guys, I'm Joardee, and this is your guide to the Blade Master of Heart of Fear and all-around prickly dude, Blade Lord Tayak.
They approach? Good. Now, if only my students were here to see and learn from the coming display of martial prowess.
So, you made it through Zorlok and your dodgeball skills were up to snuff, which means you will absolutely be able to take down Tayak because, fortunately for you, he's much easier. Tayak sits atop a dais flanked by his various lieutenants, each of which preview one of his abilities that you'll be contending with. So pay attention during the trash to get a feel for them. Alright, so Tayak is a two-phase fight, the first an onslaught of abilities as you dodge tornadoes, massive strikes, and some really nasty dots. And then the final second one as he zooms around the room throwing tornadoes at you as you race to reach him and finish him off. As far as raid comp, this is nothing special. 2 tanks and 5 healers. Druids are especially good on this fight for their battle res and roar capability, as well as symbiosis roar that they can apply to warriors. So consider that as you build your group. Okay, let's get into each of Tayak's main abilities. Quickly, the tank swap mechanic is called Overwhelming Assault. It's a simple stacking damage taken debuff, so once one tank gets 2 stacks, taunt off of them until the first one falls off. Pretty normal stuff. Next up, every 15 seconds or so, Tayak will throw a tornado out at a player, which then drifts around lazily where they were standing for the rest of the fight. As such, you'll be moving this guy around the room to avoid the tornadoes that you placed and try to cluster them around each other so that you have plenty of space for the fight. Complicating this a bit though is the second big mechanic he does this fight, Wind Step. Tayak blinks at a random ranged player and applies this dot to them and anybody within 10 yards. This lasts for 30 seconds, and while it's really not terrible if only one player gets it, if the raid isn't spread out enough and multiple people get it applied to them, it can easily lead to a wipe. DPS, you need to respect the healer's range issues on this fight and let them get the spots in the middle so they're in range of everybody.
You're too close, man.
Yes, in this case, they are more important than you. Deal with it. Wind Step is also probably the reason that they're screaming, spread out the whole fight. So, help us help you and spread out, or you will likely die. Okay, now for Wind Step, it's important to remember it's on a mostly correct timer, about every 25 seconds, so once it's gone out, you're safe to move around a bit. Just watch it and be sure to be 10 yards apart when it's about to come up. Now, there's just a couple more things to watch out for. First, Unseen Strike. This is probably going to be the mechanic that you're most likely to wipe to for the first couple times. Tayak targets a random player in the raid and marks them with a hunter's mark before vanishing. After 6 seconds, he'll lunge in their direction and cleave a massive amount of damage that's split in a cone amongst every player hit and knocks everybody back. Now the cone is pretty narrow and it's critical everybody in the raid gets hit. So it's important to handle this in a very specific way. We opt to call for a stack just before the Unseen Strike is ready to go. This usually happens right after a tornado, so wait for it to go out, then rush in. Once the target's selected, somebody with eyes, who should be the stack point, marked with skull here for example, should look behind the raid and make sure that the direction they're going to be flying through is free of tornadoes. Then backpedal a bit away from the boss, lining up a clear route behind you, only by a few steps. Pop raid cooldowns here like Devotion Aura, Barrier, Rally, Demo Ban, or whatever, and boom, the strike goes out, everybody gets yeeted, and then the raid spreads out again. Alternatively, and this is really only necessary in my opinion for the first few weeks as raids learn the fight, you could just straight up sacrifice the player that gets targeted. In this scenario, the player marked just runs out, everybody moves away from them, and Tayak slashes them up.
That is a joke. It's turned out to be a disaster.
Creed appears to be in very serious condition.
The man alive.
If he dies, he dies.
Pretty nice and simplifies things for sure, but it's definitely not optimal. Also, one thing to note, You can't bop this person or bubble it or ice block, as it's smart enough to ignore them, so either you eat it as a raid or the person dies. Alright, one more thing in phase 1, and this is actually a pretty easy mechanic, Blade Tempest. Every so often, Tayak will suck the entire raid on top of him, nice, and create a whirling dervish of himself. If players don't run out fast enough, he'll eviscerate them, so be sure to run away. And good options here are Stampeding Roar for the movement speed, Drums of Speed, anything that helps people move out quick enough. And remember, as you're running away, the normal tornadoes are still around the room, so watch where you're going and avoid them. It helps to run as a raid in the same direction, so make a call and watch it. Oh, sorry, one last thing. Every minute, Tayak gains a stack of Intensify, increasing his damage and haste by 5%. So, you are incentivized to finish the fight quickly, or you'll likely be overwhelmed with damage. Okay, rather than get into phase 2, because it's kind of a whole separate thing, let's just get into the walkthrough for phase 1. On pole, we like to leave Tayak where he is and have the raid move onto the platform behind him. The general goal of this phase is to use all of the different areas of the room as long as we can to drop tornadoes off before moving to an empty space and continuing things. We move in, staying 10 yards apart, and a wind step and some tornadoes land before the first unseen strike happens. The raid stacks. The person with the unseen strike debuff is between the boss and the raid, as the raid takes a couple steps back in a clump. We pop raid cooldowns and get knocked back. It's important that the person who's marked does not move with the raid. The raid should move separately and that person should stand still. From here, you can either try to reuse those same positions that you just had or begin moving around the room one section at a time. We like to go counterclockwise, but there's no rhyme or reason to that. Just decide where the raid is going to go and when, and then move as a group when you think there are too many tornadoes. Remember, the tornadoes target ranged players and move out to them slowly before parking themselves in a small area around where they were just sent. So players, watch where you're standing and avoid dropping them off in those centralized areas. My positioning here is very bad. This is the main thoroughfare of the room, and having a tornado land here could cause a death for somebody else later in the fight. So don't be me or Vela or any shockers or sirs. We're wrong, and you shouldn't be standing here. Now, a Blade Tempest is going to go out. I almost screwed this up by having a tornado between me and the boss. This is bad, and I get lucky. Watch your sightline and make sure that that doesn't happen to you. Alright, Blade Tempest has gone out. Now we rush into the left side of the room, staying spread out so as to avoid wind step splashing. Another tornado goes out, and again, we call for a stack because that second unseen strike is going to happen. Balto gets targeted, he stays where he is, and the raid scoots back, ready to get cleaved in a safe direction. We think the left side of the room is still mostly free of tornadoes, so we call to reuse it, and we spread out quickly. Now, another Blade Tempest, and we move to the entrance of the room, spreading out. The fight just continues this way, moving from one area, filling it with tornadoes, to another, and then finally, the last hallway. Around the fourth unseen strike, you could consider sacrificing players. This is because in addition to all the things that you're dealing with, by that fourth unseen strike, he's now up to 3 stacks of Intensify, increasing his damage and haste by 15%, which can be kind of significant. So it might be better to not have people stack, let the striked person die, and then just battle res them. Okay, so you've used up most of the room, and fortunately the boss is close to 20%. Beginning phase 2. Alright, so phase 2 is likely what you've seen of this fight in the past. Tayak rushes to the middle of the room and sucks the entire raid in before enveloping everybody in their own personal tornadoes and throwing them to one side, while he flies off to the other. From here, you've got to rush down the hallway, dodging tornadoes that he throws at you while you take tick damage from Storm Unleashed, an aura that does about 20,000 nature damage every second to everybody in the raid. The idea here is, as soon as the raid is deposited on one side, a druid or warrior with symbiosis roars the raid to increase their movement speed, and you rush to the far side quickly, dropping him to 10% before he takes off and moves to the other side, reversing the tornado's directions back at you now. Now there is a helpful trick here. The sides of the room have gusts of wind pushing you back the way that you came. But if around 12% with enough dots to push him to that 10% threshold, the entire raid jumps into those side areas that they can then use those bursts of speed that the wind gives to boost the raid to nearly the other side of the room. And if you do it just right, you can very quickly reach him as he arrives to the far side and finally finish him off.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Speed is the name of the game here, because in addition to all the tornadoes, Tayak is gaining stacks of Intensify every 10 seconds now instead of every minute. So that damage is ramping up quickly and you don't have much time before you're overwhelmed. Alright, well if you spread out well enough, stacked correctly, and soaked those unseen strikes, dodged the tornadoes, and did it all before being overwhelmed by his ramping damage, Tayak will go down. Well done. Okay, tanks, let's talk. You really need to be cognizant of positioning on this fight, as the ranged are trying very hard to not get hit by the tornadoes and need all of the room that they can get. If you see an area is already covered, you should try to move the boss away from there. Remember, they need to be spread out, so do your best to give them the room that they need. And as the fight goes on, you'll be taking more and more damage, so work to save those big cooldowns sub 50% when the Intensify will have stacked a few times. It's not too bad, but it's still worth considering. And for the healers, every unseen strike needs a cooldown or two to help the raid soak it. So barriers, Devo auras, a revival after the fact, or a spirit link are big here, so plan it out. Odds are you get 4 or 5 unseen strikes, so know when people are using what. Additionally, as with Zorlok, a Resto Druid with Symbiosis on a Shaman gets Spirit Walker's Grace, which lets them cast Tranquility while moving. Super helpful as the raid moves down the hallway, because it'll be tough to keep them up on the move. Also, priests, you can life grip people out of the tornadoes to save them from their fate, but they'll often not be very aware, as they're likely raging and throwing their keyboard because they got hit by one to begin with. So say something in comms, "Hey guy, I'm gripping you," so that they can start moving.
Oh, I got you! Oh!
You saved me.
Holy fuck, that was incredible.
And for the DPS, the ranged especially, you need to let the healers place themselves and then work around them in terms of spreading out. They need to be in range of everybody, so try to sit in the back and let them get their space. And for those with raid cooldowns, work with your healers to use them at the right time. Demo banner and rallies, smoke bombs, anything to mitigate that unseen strike damage. Okay, well, we made it. We're on to the hulking behemoth that is Garelon next, and I'm sure that you can handle it with some know-how, so be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see that one. It's a pretty unique fight, I'm excited for it, and it's way less annoying than I expected. But, yep, that's it for me. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you in the next one.
Be on skull, be on skull, be on skull, be on skull.
I got tornadoed. Fuck.
Yeah. Gotta watch that when you're coming in.
We can salvage this.
Yeah, be rich people.
Chris.